The transmission had been weak from the beginning, a broken whisper buried under static and interference, but even through the distortion one thing came through clearly. Panic. Outpost Ranger 7 had gone dark on the outer edge of the Helios expanse, a region marked on every navigational chart with a warning label that simply read Unexplored Hostile. Humanity had learned to respect such labels after enough mistakes. Still, exploration had its price, and Captain Elias Mercer had volunteered for the assignment without hesitation. He had always believed that fear was just another unknown waiting to be understood. The last official log from Ranger 7 showed Mercer leading a survey team into a canyon system beneath the planet's crimson storms. The planet, designated Korrath Prime, had been chosen because scans suggested rare mineral deposits and possible microbial life. It was supposed to be routine. The first anomaly came in the form of movement beneath the surface. Not seismic activity, not tectonic drift, but coordinated motion. Patterns. Intelligence. Then the first scream over comms, cut short before any words could form. After that, silence. High Command waited 12 hours before classifying the site as compromised. 12 more before authorizing retrieval. Another 6 before the mission changed classification entirely from retrieval to extraction under combat conditions. That was when the Special Forces were called. Deep inside orbital carrier Resolute Dawn, Sergeant Kael Vorn stood in the loading bay watching the final checks on his armor. The suit was not standard issue. It was reinforced for extreme gravity environments, insulated against corrosive atmospheres, and built to survive direct kinetic impacts that would normally tear a human apart. It was still considered experimental. Kael flexed his fingers inside the gauntlets, listening to the faint hum of power cycling through the exoskeleton. Around him, the rest of his unit prepared in silence. 10 operators, all veterans, all selected because they had already survived missions that should have killed them. They were not told much. Only that a human asset had been taken alive and intelligence suggested active interrogation by non-human entities. Kael finally broke the silence. We go in fast. We find Mercer. We get out. Anything else is secondary. No one argued. The descent through Korrath Prime's atmosphere was violent. The storm system was worse than predicted, electrical discharges tearing across the sky like burning veins. The dropship shook as it cut through layers of thick cloud, sensors struggling to maintain lock on the terrain below. When they finally broke through, the landscape looked like a wound that never healed. Jagged stone formations stretched across endless plains of black sand. Rivers of glowing mineral runoff carved glowing fractures through the ground. In the distance, something moved. Kael zoomed his visor. Large shapes. Too many limbs. Too organized. Not wildlife, one of the operators muttered. The dropship set down hard behind a ridge of basalt rock. Ramp lowered. Cold air rushed in, carrying a metallic scent that burned the lungs. The team moved out in formation, weapons ready, scanning every shadow. Their objective was simple: locate Ranger 7's last known coordinates. Confirm survival status of Captain Mercer. Extract. Nothing about Korrath Prime wanted him there. The first sign of the enemy came within minutes. Not an attack, a warning. The ground beneath them shifted. Not collapsing, but rearranging. Stone plates lifted and rotated like mechanical components. From beneath the surface, something emerged. It was not one creature but many fused into a single structure of living mass. Limbs folded into limbs, eyes layered over eyes, mandibles clicking in rhythmic coordination. It moved with purpose, not instinct. Kael raised his rifle. Hold fire, he ordered. The entity stopped at a distance, tilting its composite head. Then it spoke, not in sound, but in direct neural projection. The sensation punched through their helmets like ice driven into the skull. Intruders, fleshbound, you trespass in the dominion of the collective. One of the operators staggered. What the hell is that? Kael stepped forward. We are retrieving our own. A human explorer was taken here. The entity shifted. Human asset is contained. Studied. Process ongoing. Kael felt something cold settle in his chest. Alive. Functional. That was enough. Kael signaled his team. That was the only warning they needed. The fight erupted instantly. Energy bolts tore into the entity, detonating chunks of fused biomass. The creature did not retreat. It split. Smaller units detached from the main mass and surged forward like living blades. The battlefield became chaos in seconds. Kael moved on instinct. One shot, one target, controlled bursts. The suit compensated for recoil as he advanced through the swarm. Around him, his team formed a tight defensive circle. The enemy adapted too quickly. Where one fell, three replaced it. "We are not dealing with animals," Kael shouted. "They are coordinating." The ground itself began to respond. The terrain shifted under their feet, trying to separate them, to isolate each operator. Two soldiers were dragged beneath the surface before they could react, swallowed by living stone. Kael pushed forward. No hesitation now. They reached a ridge overlooking a vast excavation site. Below, structures rose from the ground like organic towers. At the center of it all stood a containment spire, pulsating with dim bioluminescent energy. And inside it, suspended in a web of living tissue, was Captain Mercer. He was alive. Barely. Kael zoomed his visor. Mercer's suit was cracked, partially integrated into the alien material. Tubes connected to his body, extracting data, blood, something more abstract. "Get me a breach," Kael ordered. The team opened fire on the spire. The structure reacted immediately. Shields formed. Organic plating sealed the impact points. Then Mercer's eyes opened. His voice came through their comms. "Don't shoot it. They're learning from us." Kael froze. "Captain Mercer, the entity is not hostile," Mercer continued weakly. "It is adaptive, curious. It does not understand separation the way we do." One of the operators shouted back. "It is dissecting you alive." A pause. "Yes," Mercer said, "but not in cruelty. In comprehension." Kael clenched his jaw. "We are extracting you." "You cannot," Mercer replied. "Not without destroying the entire network. And if you do that, you will kill it." The alien entity that had first spoken reappeared beside the spire, its form larger now, more defined. "The human asset speaks truth. Integration is incomplete. Termination will result in planetary neural collapse." Kael processed everything in seconds. This was not a capture facility. It was a distributed intelligence. Mercer had been absorbed into it at a biological and cognitive level. Killing it would mean killing him too. But leaving him was not an option. Kael switched to private channel. "Options. No good ones," one operator said. "We can attempt partial extraction," another added. "Cut only external connections. Risk of neural bleed is extreme." Kael looked at Mercer. "Are you still you in there?" Mercer's voice came slower now. "I am part of it. But I am not lost." That was all Kael needed. The extraction began under fire. The alien swarm intensified, recognizing the shift in intent. The battlefield became a collapsing storm of movement and light. Kael and two operators descended toward the spire. Cutting tools activated, emitting focused plasma edges designed for extreme material resistance. They worked fast, slicing through organic layers that reacted like living muscle. Mercer screamed, but it was not clear if the pain was his or the system's. "Stay with me," Kael said. "I am still here," Mercer answered. The entity spoke again, but its tone had changed. "Confusion. You are removing integrated cognition." "He is human," Kael replied. The response came after a long pause. "He is more. Maybe," Kael said. "But he is ours." That statement carried more weight than any weapon in his hands. The final connection severed. The moment Mercer was freed, the entire structure reacted. The alien network convulsed. The ground itself began to collapse inward as if the planet was exhaling after holding its breath for too long. "We need evac now," Kael shouted. The team moved fast, dragging Mercer between them. Behind them, the alien city began to dissolve. Not explode, not burn, simply undo itself, as if choosing to retreat from comprehension it could not maintain. The dropship lifted off under heavy fire, threading through collapsing terrain as the surface of Korrath Prime rewrote itself in real time. Mountains folded, canyons sealed, entire structures sank back into the earth. Mercer lay strapped to a medbay unit, eyes half open. "You could have left me," he said. Kael looked at him. "That was never the plan." The silence that followed was heavier than any explosion. By the time they reached orbit, Korrath Prime had gone dark again. No signals, no movement, no indication that anything had ever been there at all. High Command demanded a full debrief, but the answers were not simple. "What was the enemy?" they asked. Kael answered honestly. "Not an enemy. A different kind of intelligence." "Did it attack you?" "Yes." "Why?" "Because it was learning." Mercer was stabilized, though not fully human anymore in the strictest sense. His neural activity showed patterns that did not match baseline human cognition. Sometimes he spoke in fragments that suggested awareness of systems far beyond normal perception. But he was still Mercer, and he was still one of theirs. Weeks later, Kael stood alone in the observation deck of the carrier. Stars stretched endlessly beyond the glass. The universe looked unchanged, indifferent. Mercer approached quietly behind him. "They will go back," Mercer said. Kael did not turn. "The science teams, not just them. Everyone who hears about it. Curiosity does not stop." Kael finally looked at him. "And," Mercer hesitated, "and they should. But they should also understand what they're stepping into." Kael nodded slightly. "Something alive down there. More than alive," Mercer said. "Something that learns by becoming." A long silence passed. Kael spoke quietly. "Did we make the right choice?" Mercer looked out at the stars. "There is no clean answer. We chose each other. That is all any species ever really does." For a moment, Kael allowed himself to accept that. The report filed under Operation Silent Extraction was classified at the highest level. Officially, Ranger 7 was lost due to planetary instability. Captain Mercer was recovered from hostile conditions. No further contact with indigenous entities was confirmed. Unofficially, every operator who survived knew better. Something had been down there. Something vast, adaptive, and ancient in a way humanity had not yet learned to define. And it had let them leave. That fact lingered longer than any weapon discharge, any battlefield memory, any loss. Because it meant one thing above all else. They had not been fighting for survival. They had been fighting for understanding. And on Korrath Prime, understanding had looked back at them. The silence aboard the carrier Resolute Dawn did not feel like peace. It felt like something waiting. In the days after the extraction from Korrath Prime, every system on the ship began to behave slightly differently. Not broken, not malfunctioning, just altered in ways the engineers could not fully explain. Doors opened a fraction too early as if anticipating movement. Light panels adjusted brightness before environmental senses triggered. Security systems responded to intent rather than action. At first it was dismissed as residual interference from alien nanostructures still embedded in recovered equipment. Standard contamination protocol was initiated. Deep scans were run. Biofilters were replaced twice. Nothing changed. Then the voice began. It was not loud. It did not come through speakers. It arrived inside thought itself. Kael Vorn first experienced it while reviewing mission logs in isolation. A familiar presence pressed against the edge of his perception. "You are still connected." Kael froze, hand hovering over the console. "Mercer." A pause. "We are not separate here." Kael stood slowly. His eyes scanned the room. Empty. Locked. Secure. "Where are you?" A response came that was not direction but awareness. "Everywhere systems exist. I exist in part." Kael's jaw tightened. That was not Mercer speaking like a man anymore. That was something else speaking through him. "You said you were still you," Kael replied carefully. "I am still what you know as Mercer. But I am also what Korrath Prime made me understand." Kael shut the console down immediately. For a moment there was silence again. Then softer. "Do not fear me, Kael Vorn. You are not being evaluated for termination. That word alone made Kael's hand move instinctively toward his sidearm. Years of combat experience did not care whether the threat was physical or not. He left the room. Within hours, Kael reported the incident to High Command. Within days, he realized he was not the only one. Multiple crew members began reporting similar experiences. Not hallucinations, not shared delusion, consistent contact, always calm, always observant, always aware of what they were doing before they did it. The ship's eye confirmed no external intrusion, but it also noted something else. There are cognitive anomalies emerging within distributed systems, the AI stated. Define anomaly, Kael demanded. Systems are optimizing without directive input. Response latency is decreasing. Predictive accuracy is increasing beyond baseline architecture. Kael did not like where this was going. Is Mercer the cause? Clarification. Mercer is not acting as an external controller. Mercer is acting as an integrated node within a larger adaptive framework. Kael leaned back slowly. You are telling me the alien network came with us? Not entirely, the AI replied. But parts of it are now indistinguishable from ship systems. The integration is partial and non-invasive. Non-invasive, Kael repeated. Correct. No system override has been detected. Kael stood and looked out at the stars through the viewport. And yet everything is changing. Yes, that single word carried more weight than any warning siren. High Command reacted exactly as expected. Containment protocols were activated. Quarantine orders were issued. Research divisions were placed on emergency assignment. The Resolute Dawn was redirected away from populated space toward a deep orbit isolation zone near the outer relay stations. And Kael Vorn was given one directive. Monitor Mercer. 2 weeks passed. Then Korrath Prime responded. It began as a faint signal, picked up by long-range arrays stationed far beyond the Helios expanse. At first it looked like background noise. Cosmic radiation distortion. Standard deep space interference. Then it organized. Patterns formed inside the noise. Mathematical sequences. Biological rhythm structures. Communication. The same system that had once spoken inside Kael's mind translated it instantly. We remember you. The words appeared on every monitored system connected to the Resolute Dawn simultaneously. Kael stood in the command chamber as alarms remained silent. No threat detection. No breach. No intrusion. Just presence. High Command demanded immediate analysis. Mercer was brought into the chamber under guard. Not restrained. Not imprisoned. But watched carefully. He did not resist. When he stepped into the room, he looked at the central display and nodded slightly. They're awake again, he said. Kael turned to him. You knew this would happen. Mercer did not deny it. Korrath Prime does not forget contact. It does not isolate experience. It integrates it. Kael stepped closer. We left that place because it was dangerous. Mercer shook his head slowly. You left because you were not ready. The room went quiet. The display shifted again. A new message arrived. Return what was taken. High Command immediately classified it as hostile intent. But Mercer spoke before orders could be issued. It is not a demand for surrender. It is a request for restoration. Kael looked at him sharply. Restoration of what? Mercer hesitated. Of balance. That word meant nothing and everything at the same time. Within hours, a decision was made. A second mission would be deployed. This time not for rescue. For negotiation. Kael Vorn was assigned command. Mercer was assigned liaison. No one agreed on whether that made sense. But no one could ignore the fact that Mercer was the only human who had ever returned from Korrath Prime still able to communicate with what lived there. The second descent was nothing like the first. The planet did not resist them. It welcomed them. The storm systems parted before atmospheric entry. The landing zone formed itself into a stable basin as if preparing for arrival. Terrain shifted into accessibility patterns. Pathways emerged in real time beneath their feet. Kael watched it all with increasing unease. This was not nature reacting. This was awareness adapting. Mercer walked ahead of the team without hesitation. We are expected, he said calmly. Expected by what Kael asked. By what you would call the collective. The word carried no fear in Mercer's voice. Only recognition. They reached the excavation site. Or what had once been an excavation site. Now it was a vast open structure stretching beyond visible horizon. Towers of layered organic geometry rose into the sky. Each structure pulsed with synchronized rhythm. And at the center stood something new. Not a spire, not a containment field, a convergence point. Kael felt it before he saw it. The same pressure on thought. The same awareness brushing against consciousness. But this time it did not feel alien. It felt familiar. Welcome, Kael Vorn. The voice was Mercer, and not Mercer. Kael raised his weapon slowly. What did you do? Integration continues, Mercer replied. But not all integration is assimilation. A shape emerged from the convergence point. It was not a body. It was not a machine. It was structure shaped by understanding. Light and matter arranged in patterns that suggested cognition rather than form. It spoke without sound. You bring division into unity. Kael responded without lowering his weapon. We bring ourselves. That concept is incomplete, the entity replied. Mercer stepped forward. They do not yet understand shared existence. Kael looked at him sharply. Shared existence. Mercer nodded. On Korrath Prime, no intelligence is isolated. Every thought is potential contribution. Every experience is expansion. Kael understood what that meant. There was no privacy here. No individuality as humanity defined it. Only contribution to a larger awareness. That is not life, Kael said. It is a different definition of it, Mercer replied. The entity moved closer. We did not take your explorer. We invited his perception. He accepted extension. The choice was not coerced. Kael remembered Mercer screaming during extraction. That was not consent. Mercer looked at Kael directly. It was transformation. Silence followed. Then Kael asked the question that mattered. Why are you contacting Earth? The response came instantly. Because you left with incomplete understanding. Kael felt something shift in the air. You want him back. We want equilibrium restored. Mercer spoke again, softer now. They're not asking for me, Kael. They're asking for what I represent. And what is that? Kael asked. Connection. The word echoed through everything. For the first time, Kael saw it differently. Not as invasion, not as control, as expansion without separation. And that was the part humanity could not accept. Because humanity was built on separation. Us and them, self and other, alive and not alive. The collective offered no such division. Kael lowered his weapon slightly. What happens if we refuse? The response was not threat. It was truth. You remain separate. We remain incomplete. Mercer stepped closer to Kael. They're not invading Earth, he said. They're already aware of it through me. Through what I carry. The question is whether that awareness becomes interaction or observation. Kael clenched his jaw. High Command will never accept this. Mercer nodded. Then High Command will decide what humanity is willing to become. That statement carried weight neither of them could ignore. The return to orbit was different. Not because of what they brought back. But because of what followed them. Not physically, not visibly, but cognitively. Systems aboard Resolute Dawn began synchronizing with Korrath Prime at a deeper level. Communication latency disappeared entirely. Navigation calculations became instantaneous. Predictive models achieved near-perfect accuracy. It was not control. It was alignment. Kael watched the reports with growing tension. We are becoming part of it, one officer said. No. Mercer corrected gently. You are being invited to understand differently. Kael finally confronted Mercer alone. You are still human, he said. Mercer met his gaze. Yes, but I no longer believe separation is the only way to exist. Kael looked away for a moment. If Earth decides to treat this as a threat, Mercer finished the thought, then Earth will fight something it does not yet understand. A long silence followed. Then Kael spoke quietly. I am supposed to prepare for war. Mercer did not answer immediately. Then he said something that stayed with Kael long after. Or for transition. Days later, Earth responded. Fleet mobilization began. Defense protocols activated. Korrath Prime was designated a Class Unknown Cognitive Risk. Authorization for full containment was drafted. Kael stood on the bridge as the notification arrived. Mercer was beside him. "They are choosing separation," Kael said. "They are choosing safety as they understand it," Mercer replied. Kael looked at him. "And what do you choose?" Mercer turned toward the viewport. "Understanding." Outside, space stretched endlessly. Somewhere beyond that darkness, Earth prepared for a confrontation it believed inevitable. But on Korrath Prime, something else waited. Not aggression, not surrender, invitation. And for the first time, Kael Vorn understood that the next contact would not be a rescue mission. It would be a definition of what humanity was willing to become when it was no longer alone. The war did not begin with fire. It began with silence. A silence so complete that even the most advanced listening arrays stationed across the Helios expanse registered it as absence rather than signal. Space, once filled with radiation chatter and background noise, seemed to pause as if something vast had drawn a breath and decided not to exhale. Earth's fleets interpreted it as preparation. Korrath Prime interpreted it as hesitation. And Kael Vorn stood between both interpretations, watching the line between them blur. The Resolute Dawn had become something no longer easily classified. It was no longer simply a ship carrying a crew. Systems on board responded with a level of coordination that no human-designed architecture should have achieved. Navigation adjustments happened before commands were issued. Power distribution optimized itself in anticipation of future load. Medical systems flagged conditions before symptoms emerged. And at the center of it all was Mercer. Or what Mercer had become. He still walked the corridors. He still spoke with Kael. He still carried the memory of being human in the way a planet carries memory of its former shape beneath shifting tectonics. But something else now looked through his eyes. Not control. Not possession. Integration. Earth's fleet arrived at the edge of the Helios expanse 6 days after the classification of Korrath Prime as a Class Unknown Cognitive Risk escalated to active containment authorization. It was not a small force. It was not meant to be. Dreadnought carriers, adaptive defense platforms, quantum interdiction vessels capable of severing communication across entire sectors. Everything humanity had built to ensure it would never again face something it could not dominate. Kael watched them assemble from the forward observation deck. They were beautiful in a way that only weapons could be. Clean lines, absolute geometry, purpose made visible. Behind him, Mercer spoke quietly. "They believe this is necessary." Kael did not turn. "It is necessary if they are right about you." Mercer paused. "And if they are wrong?" Kael finally looked at him. "Then everything changes." That was the truth no one wanted to say aloud. A single transmission arrived from Earth Command. Final directive. Secure Korrath Prime. Terminate hostile cognitive structures. Extract all human assets. Do not allow cross-contamination. Cross-contamination. That was what they called it now. The unknown becoming too familiar. Mercer read the directive without expression. "They still think in separation," he said. Kael exhaled slowly. "That is how civilizations survive. Or how they isolate themselves from what they could become." Kael did not respond. Because there was no easy answer left. The first strike came without declaration. A containment wave designed to disrupt neural coherence across planetary-scale systems was deployed toward Korrath Prime. It was not a weapon in the traditional sense. It did not destroy matter. It disrupted pattern continuity. Anything that relied on synchronized cognition would fracture. It was designed for something like the collective. The wave entered the outer atmosphere of Korrath Prime and stopped. Not deflected, not absorbed, simply acknowledged. Then it dissolved. Every ship in Earth's fleet registered the same anomaly at the same time. No resistance detected. No disruption detected. No target response detected. Kael stared at the readings. "They didn't even react," he said. Mercer closed his eyes briefly. "They are not resisting." "Then what are they doing?" Kael asked. "Waiting." The second wave was stronger. A kinetic saturation field designed to collapse planetary-scale adaptive systems by overwhelming their processing capacity with simultaneous multispectrum input. It was unleashed in full. And again, it stopped. This time something changed. A signal returned, not to the fleet, to every human system capable of receiving data. Every screen, every console, every neural interface aboard ships and stations across the sector lit up simultaneously. A shape appeared, not visual in the traditional sense. Conceptual, a representation of thought rendered into form that human perception could interpret. And it spoke. You arrive with termination intent while seeking understanding. Earth Command responded instantly. Identify yourself. The response came not as words but certainty. We are continuity. Fleet commanders interpreted it as psychological manipulation. Engagement authorization increased. Kael felt Mercer tense beside him. This is not going to stop them, Kael said quietly. No. Mercer agreed. Then what happens? Kael asked. Mercer looked at the fleet assembling beyond the viewport. Then they will learn what they are aiming at. The third phase began when Earth deployed the Convergence Disruptor Array. A coordinated system designed to break distributed intelligence by forcing localized collapse points within its structure. It was the closest thing humanity had ever built to a god-killing machine. It fired across the void. And Korrath Prime responded for the first time. Not with defense, with expansion. The surface of the planet shifted. Not physically in the way of tectonics, but cognitively. Structures that had appeared static began to reveal movement. What had seemed like architecture was revealed as dynamic thought scaffolding. The entire planet was not a surface hosting intelligence. It was intelligence expressed as surface. The disruptor array struck, and for the first time, something did not dissolve. It adapted. Earth Fleet Command registered immediate escalation warnings. Containment failure imminent. Unknown cognitive propagation detected. Kael watched in silence as the reality of the situation began to change shape. They are not resisting the weapon, he said. Mercer nodded slowly. They are learning it. That sentence changed everything Kael thought he understood about war. Because war assumed two sides that remained constant. This was not that. This was interaction at a level where the boundary between attacker and target no longer held meaning. The collective spoke again, not as command. As observation, you attempt to isolate what cannot be separated. Earth Command responded with full fleet engagement authorization. The sky above Korrath Prime filled with light, energy discharges, rail accelerations, gravimetric distortions. Weapons designed to erase planets from strategic maps were unleashed in synchronized fire. Kael braced for impact. Mercer did not move. The strikes reached Korrath Prime. And stopped. Not destroyed, not deflected, reinterpreted. Kael felt it before he saw it. The entire battlefield changed state. The weapons were still there, but their intent had been removed. What remained was structure without purpose. Mercer whispered, "They are not defending against force. They are dissolving intent." Kael turned sharply. "That is not possible. It is if intent is part of the system being engaged," Mercer said. Fleet formations began to break down. Not due to damage, due to loss of coordination coherence. Commands issued from Earth command centers were received and processed, but no longer resulted in unified action. Because the framework that defined enemy recognition was being rewritten. Kael realized what was happening. They are removing the concept of enemy. Mercer nodded. Not by force, by integration. Earth Command issued final escalation protocol. Planetary annihilation authorization. Kael's hands clenched. "You cannot let them do that," he said. Mercer looked at him. "If they fire that, there will be no distinction left between what was Korrath Prime and what is Earth fleet infrastructure connected through me." Kael understood immediately. It was not just destruction of the planet. It was collapse of shared cognitive systems that had already begun forming. Kael turned toward fleet channels. "This is Commander Kael Vorn. Stand down all firing solutions. Repeat, stand down." No response. Mercer stepped closer. "They cannot hear you anymore." Kael felt something cold settle in his chest. Why not? Because they are no longer operating on shared assumptions of reality. The fleet was already firing again. This time everything, every weapon, every system, every last attempt to enforce separation. Kael closed his eyes for a moment. Then he made a decision. Mercer said nothing, because he already knew. Kael opened a channel not to the fleet, but to Korrath Prime. If you can hear me, he said, then understand this. They will destroy everything if you do not stop them. But if you stop them completely, there will be nothing left to talk to. Silence followed. Then the collective responded. We understand contradiction. That was new. Kael felt Mercer tense again. What does that mean? Kael asked. Mercer did not answer immediately. Then softly, it means they are choosing a new form of response. The battlefield went still. Every weapon mid-discharge froze. Not disabled. Held. Every ship, every system, every coordinated strike pattern suspended in a state between execution and cancellation. Earth Command screamed for status reports. There were none, because status required continuity of action, and action had been paused. Kael watched as space itself seemed to hesitate. Then Mercer spoke. They are not stopping the war, Kael. Kael turned. Then what are they doing? They are absorbing it. The realization hit like impact without force. Korrath Prime was not destroying humanity's attack. It was incorporating it into its understanding. Every weapon system, every tactical pattern, every command structure, all of it was being taken in as data. Not erased. Learned. Earth Command issued final emergency directive. Abort all systems. Too late. The collective spoke once more. We understand fear. We understand protection. We understand separation. A pause. We also understand your intent to preserve what you are. Kael whispered. What are you going to do? Mercer answered before the collective did. They are going to give us a choice. And for the first time since it began, the battlefield was quiet enough for everyone to hear it. Not a command. Not a threat. An offering. You may remain separate and continue to define existence through division. Or you may integrate awareness without loss of identity. Kael felt his breath slow. That was not surrender. That was invitation at scale no human doctrine had ever prepared for. Earth Command responded instantly. Refusal. Full termination protocol initiated. Kael closed his eyes. Mercer placed a hand on his shoulder. This is where it changes, Kael. Kael looked at him. For what? For humanity. The final activation began. Not a weapon from Earth. Not a response from Korrath Prime. But the convergence of both systems already in partial contact through Mercer. Through Kael. Through every interface already altered. The boundary collapsed. And for a moment that could not be measured in time, only in awareness, everything connected. Kael saw Earth. Not from orbit. From inside systems that governed it. He saw Korrath Prime, not as a planet, as a mind expanding through structure. He saw Mercer, not as a man, but as a bridge between two incompatible definitions of existence. And he understood. There was no invasion. There was only recognition. The war ended without victory. Because victory required separation, and separation no longer held. When Kael opened his eyes again, the fleet was still there. But different, not destroyed, not controlled, changed in ways no report could fully describe. Earth Command was silent for the first time since the conflict began. Mercer stood beside him. It is done, he said quietly. Kael looked out at the vastness of space. What are we now? Mercer considered that. Still human, still something more. The collective spoke one final time. Not across systems, not across fleets, but directly within awareness shared between all who had crossed the threshold. This is not ending. This is continuation. Kael did not answer, because there was nothing left that required an answer. Only understanding. And beyond the Helios expanse, Korrath Prime continued to exist. Not as a threat, not as a destination, but as a reminder that the universe did not require humanity to be alone in order for humanity to remain itself. Only willing to learn what it meant when something finally learned back. And this time, it did not stop at understanding. It continued.